It's Tuesday here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, which means it's grades day. We're going to break down everything we saw positive and negative with our stars and skulls grades that we do every Tuesday here after the games. But we're going to lead off talking about this passing offense. We can talk about the defense, we can talk about the offensive line, but the part of this offense that's supposed to keep the group afloat, and again, not excel, but afloat, it's supposed to be the receiving group that's supposed to make it easier for Kenny Pickett and was supposed to make it easier for Mitch Trubisky. They haven't done that as much consistently. Maybe one or two guys, but we got to talk about how they can step up and what specific parts do need to step up to make this offense work. We'll get into that, our grades, and a lot more here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things of the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button on this video if you enjoy it. Hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered all season long with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Now, as I said, I wanted to focus on the passing game, but I want to make sure we check in with Steeler Nation because, listen, y'all, I get it. Sunday was rough, and it is rough right now. The Steelers are 1-4. There's not much. It's not looking good for a turnaround right now. But people go to the ultimate extremes with everything all the time. And listen, if you're one of the Fire Tomlin people, I get it. That's just who you are. You can't be helped. You're just going to say that because you're mad. I get it. But the people who really thought that Cam Hayward was retweeting something that was obviously a mistake when he retweeted it. But he for those who might not be familiar, Cam Hayward Monday evening or Monday afternoon retweeted something that was initially praising him, but was also kind of bashing Tomlin and the rest of the team. And so people are like, oh my God, does Cam Hayward hate Mike Tomlin? Does Cam Hayward hate the locker room? Is this what's going on? And, oh my God, he's the team leader turning on the Steelers. And like, soon after, Cam Hayward undid the retweet and was like, "Hey y'all, I was dumb. Like I read part of the tweet. I should have read the whole thing. That was my mistake. I'm not here to bash nobody. I'm pointing at me." And it's like, did y'all really think that he changed up after what 11, 12 years in the league? No, I just like the links that people are going to make things that aren't things. And like anybody, I was talking with Brian Batko of the Pittsburgh Post Gazette, who we've had on this show. But he was like, yeah, it's obvious that Cam just mistakenly did that and just didn't read the whole thing. It happens. And people wanted to take that to the nth degree, but everyone, woosah. That's not what you need to focus on right now. What we do want to focus on, which we do right now on the show, it's what do they need to do to get better? What do they need to do to get out of this losing streak? The Steelers are on a 4-game losing streak. First time since, I think, 2016 that this has happened. Granted, that was the team that made the AFC Championship game, but this ain't that team. They got to find ways to get answers. And this offense that we knew all along, the offensive line was patchwork. We knew that they were going to struggle. The quarterbacks, Mitch Trubisky was journeyman. You knew was coming in here, was going to try to just keep them afloat. Kenny Pickett, a rookie, especially in this start, his first start against the number 2 defense in the country, you needed somebody to step up in the passing game that was going to be the guys that you've invested a lot into, whether it was money or draft capital. The Steelers have Diontae Johnson, who they paid wide receiver 1 money to get that too. They've drafted 2 second-rounders in Chase Claypool and George Pickens. They've also invested a second-rounder into Pat Freiermuth. It's a lot of investments into playmakers in the passing game to try to make up for the other weaknesses in this offense. Now, Pat Freiermuth went out of this game with a concussion. That's one thing. And George Pickens, I think, is making plays when he's getting there too. But you need to see more from your other guys. And we'll get into Kenny's grade, and you'll hear my assessment of that, because there were things that he missed that were definitely there in this game, but they weren't to the level that Mitch Trubisky was missing things left and right consistently throughout a game. I think that the thing was that there were plenty of opportunities that Kenny Pickett gave the Steelers and their receivers to make plays to keep them in the game, or to at least change the tone of the game before this game got out of hand that they didn't capitalize on. And I noticed it when I was watching back over the all 22, and I realized, wait a second, the first 2 third down failures of the game were both targets to Diontae Johnson. One would have required a ridiculous toe tap on the sideline, which I guess it wouldn't be ridiculous. It would be a difficult one, but again, that's wide receiver one money. That's what you are being paid to make happen. One would have been that, and the other one was the one that bounced right off his hands on third down when Kenny Pickett escaped the pocket, found his way back to the middle part of the field, and threw it to him. He just dropped it. If Diontae Johnson makes those 2 plays, one, the Steelers might get a touchdown in the opening drive of the game, something that hasn't happened, it seems like, since the merger of the NFL, since Chuck Noll took over. But the other one, it keeps the drive alive. The defense had just gotten, the defense is trying to recover. They're facing one of the top offenses in the league. They're being blasted. They're trying to keep you alive, and you have that play. Kenny Pickett does his job there, and you don't come down with it. And I know some people are sitting out there saying, well, wait a minute, Chris, that Mitch Trubisky had some similar problems, and he did. But the problem is that I think the difference was Mitch Trubisky, that would happen 1 or 2 times a game where he would put the ball in the right place and the guys would let him down. This was like 6 or 7 times. You go to those 2 third down failures. You go to one in the end zone where Kenny Pickett throws, I think, one of the best passes we've seen this year of any Steelers quarterback. And it goes to the front pylon of the end zone. The Bills can't get to it. It's such a perfect throw. Diontae Johnson sees it, tries to toe tap, and yet again misses. And again, he's getting paid money to do that. And listen, I think a lot of people, and back to the whole Cam Hayward thing, people are concerned that the Steelers don't care, that they're not fired up about this. Go listen to some of their comments from Monday. They're mad. Like Diontae Johnson, he's frustrated. He's frustrated Ryan Clark, from ESPN, because he's tired of hearing him yap. He came at the fans, and I think he shouldn't have done that. But at the same time, you could tell, yeah, these guys are working to be better. It's not that they're sitting out there just accepting their loss and just saying, oh, well, I got my paycheck, I'm moving on. And I think there's guys on the team that need to get an attitude check for certain things, but I don't think it's that the lack of effort is the problem. They got to come through. They have to execute in the moment. And Diontae Johnson hasn't done that. And you had that. You also had a drop on 4th down where Kenny Pickett delivered it on time on an out route to the sideline. Not only hits Diontae Johnson in the hands, but he gets control of it, but then it's punched out by the defender. Those are things you can't happen from your number one wide receiver. And that one was more so in garbage time when the game was out of hand. But it's those type of things. You need these guys to not just be catching the ball that's thrown to them, but to catch the ball and make the next guy miss. And they're not doing that. They're not doing it because there's yet to be a wide receiver with a touchdown in this offense, and we're 5 weeks into the season. And that's not just by design. It's not Matt Canada not drawing stuff up for them to get in the end zone. Because in the Jets game, Diontae Johnson had a chance to get his toe down for a touchdown in the first half. In this game, Diontae Johnson had a chance to get his toe down in the end zone in the I think it was the second half. No, I might have been the first half. Either way, you know what I'm saying. These guys need to step up and actually make the plays that the Steelers saw them to be being able to make. Otherwise, they're not going to be part of the future of this team. I feel like George Pickens has done that early on. But specifically, Johnson and Claypool, they're the vets. Someone has to set a tone for this group to help Kenny Pickett out. And if they don't, this passing offense is never going to figure itself out unless it's just Kenny Pickett just throwing it to George Pickens all the time and he becomes Antonio Brown. And I think that George Pickens can be a phenomenal receiver in the NFL, but you got to give him time to develop into that. And if he becomes your number one wide receiver, that's awesome, but you're still going to need those other 2 guys to get open and make plays, and when the ball comes to them, to make those plays. Again, the offensive line, there's the James Daniels is a decent payment to bring to it. They brought in Mason Cole to help. They paid Chukuma Okorafor to stick around. But this is not, that's not the group that you expected to lift this offense up. The group that you expected to lift this offense up were the playmakers, the guys who, when you get the ball in their hands, they're going to make somebody miss. They're going to do something awesome, and they're going to keep the offense going. They're going to keep the drives alive and make the job easier for the quarterback. They haven't done that. And I look at play calls. I look at Matt Canada. A lot of people saying, well, Matt Canada this, Matt Canada that. Man, those guys are open. And the problem is that Kenny Pickett, a lot of times they were open, he was getting it there, and they needed to be able to make a play. And that's not to say Kenny Pickett was perfect. He was far from that, and I'll get to that in my grades. But there were plenty of opportunities for them that Kenny Pickett gave them to say, hey, you guys got to go do it. And this stems back to the Gems game, the jump ball to Chase Claypool. It wasn't the best thrown ball, but you know what? It was thrown in a way that he had a chance to out jump a guy who was about 6 inches shorter than him, and he didn't. So again, I look back at this game and I say, man, the biggest thing about the offense that has to change moving forward is those guys have to turn into playmakers, not what if guys, not 50-50 guys. Like sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. They need to produce consistently, and if they can't, that's gonna make this year very tough for the offense to ever move. And it's also going to put in jeopardy, the Steelers may need to go back and look into the wide receiver pool to go get somebody that can take charge of this group. And maybe they got that guy in George Pickens for the future. But they need other options to make this group work. And frankly, I don't think they have the time in the next upcoming drafts to reinvest into the wide receiver position with high picks when they got to fix the offensive line. They got to reinforce the defensive line. They maybe need to get another edge rusher. They got linebacker, cornerback. There's a lot of things that they're going to need to address in the coming drafts. And I'm not so sure wide receiver is one of the positions that you want to address. But again, we'll get into all those other positions in our grades that are coming up right here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, we got to talk to you guys about one of our great new sponsors called Tommy John. Now, listeners and viewers, I want you to pay attention and not freak out when I say this first sentence, but this is literally what they gave me in the copy to read for this. Fall is chaos in your pants. It's not what you think it means. It's not what you think it means. Get your mind out of the gutter. It just means that sometimes in the fall, you're overheating 1 second and freezing the next. See, you went to some place you weren't supposed to go, and you know what you did. You know you're wrong. But here, Tommy John is here to talk to you about their clothing line that's here to help you deal with the hot, the cold, in every way that you can. Sometimes you need the underwear that's going to help you handle everything. That's why you go for Tommy John underwear. In Tommy John underwear, you're much more comfortable. You actually, it's things that helps you do everything better. You name a problem with your underwear, and Tommy John's going to solve it. Tommy John's breathable, lightweight fabric, has 4 times the stretch of competing brands. They come with no wedgie guarantees, thanks to a non-rolling waistband and legs that never ride up. Plus, they feature a horizontal quick draw fly. With over 17 million pairs sold, people love Tommy John underwear. That's why Tommy John doesn't have customers. They have fanatics. Tommy John actually sent me some underwear and some PJs. And let me tell you, these PJs have been perfect for Pittsburgh fall weather. Because if you live in Pittsburgh, you know you can't count on anything in the fall. You think it's hot? No, it's going to be cold. You think it's cold? No, it's going to be hot. You think it's just going to be nice in the middle? Nope, it's going to rain on your parade. But when I wear these Tommy Johns, I'm good in the cold, I'm good in the hot, and it's perfect. And that's why I'm telling you, go get yourself some Tommy Johns. Go to TommyJohn.com/lockedon right now, and you can get 20% off your first order. That's 20% off at TommyJohn.com/lockedon. Again, TommyJohn.com/lockedon. See their site for details. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. Continue to talk about your Pittsburgh Steelers. It's grades time. We talked about the passing offense. Again, we're going to get into these guys in a bit because these guys, of course, come up in my grades. But I think they're some of the heaviest guys that weigh into this offense and it trying to step forward. So, with that being said, how we're going to do it, we're going to go backwards. We're going to go, normally I do the good grades first, the bad grades last. I'm going to go with the bad grades first because they were the more prominent in this game. There's a lot more bad grades than there are good grades. And we're going to go over our rubric here. If you're new to the Locked On Steelers podcast and you're watching on YouTube, you can see the rubric that's up here. But for those who aren't new, bear with me. We have our system of stars and skulls. Stars mean good grades. Skulls mean bad grades. If you receive 3 stars, you had an elite performance. 2 stars, great play / a good day. 1 star means you had a good play / a good day. Basically, you came up like big one time and you weren't really noticeably bad anywhere else. Great play, you came up in an awesome moment, and you also had like a decent day to go along with it. Elite performance, 3 stars, just means like, hey, that's like all pro stuff. You keep that up, you're going to be Pro Bowl, all pro, all that. You're lifting the team. You're putting the team on your back. But in reverse, the skulls, 1 skull means you had a bad play without redemption, not a terrible day, just like, hey, you just had a rough moment there and you never got your chance to get your payback. 2 skulls means you had a bad game as a whole. You just kind of consistently got beat. 3 skulls mean you were all-time terrible. And we have not had a 3 skull grade yet on this podcast because I didn't feel like anyone had really earned that yet. Even Mitch Trubisky, when he was struggling, I felt like it was, I worked 2 skulls sometimes, but, not that. This game, we did have some 3 skulls, and we had 3 skull guys that I'm putting on the board here, and that's Diontae Johnson, Kevin Dotson, and Malik Reed. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, Diontae Johnson, well, didn't he have some catches to redeem himself? Yes, but these were the basic plays that he got done. There was never a play to redeem his missed touchdown opportunity in the end zone where he could have gotten the toe tap, the drop 3rd down pass, the missed toe tap on another 3rd down. Deontay Johnson is paid this kind of money. And there is the curve. I do grade these guys on a bit of a curve for basically what you see there in the situation where how they're getting paid. And you're saying like, hey, you know what? These guys need to show up. If you're getting paid more, if a guy like if Minkah Fitzpatrick, and you'll see his grade in just a bit there, Minkah Fitzpatrick is getting paid a lot of money. He needs to come up in a certain play, but I'm not going to put on like if Jaylen Warren doesn't bust out, gets stuffed on a play. I'm not going to say, oh man, he stinks. I'm going to say like, hey, he didn't get it done here, but he's also not getting paid to get it done in that way. Diontae Johnson though did. Now the other 2 guys, Kevin Dotson, I think he's had some really good days, but he is, I think, one of the more mercurial guys in the offensive line right now, in that he is up and he is down. And this game, he was really down. I think that he got beat up a lot by Quinnen Williams last week. He not only got beat up in this game, but he was missing key combination blocks, times when it was time to chips to the backer to give Najee Harris plays. Najee Harris, a lot of people getting on him for a lot of these plays where, he's not seeing the hole. It's because he's dodging defensive linemen who are in the backfield before he can even get started. And I think that there's times where like he gets 1 or 2 yards and like, well, that run sucked. It's because that he doesn't have the space in the backfield to make a decision, to process. He's immediately saying, I have to go into dodge mode. I have to figure out to make this play survive. And it's been rough. And there's times where he's missed a hole here and there, but those are much fewer and far between compared to the times that a defense is just swarming and taking things over. And Kevin Dotson, to me, was the main culprit. We'll get to the other guys soon. But Malik Reed is my last 3 skull guy. Man, when he's out there, it's like he's a liability. He can't seal the edge against the run. He does nothing in pass rush. He is just literally giving you nothing right now. And again, that's not to say that he can't ever give you something, but he has to step up at some point. That's why they're rotating DeMarvin Leal over to the edge, and I brought that up in yesterday's episode. But if you're the Steelers, you got to find a way to if you're the Steelers, you got to find a way to at least get some production out of your edge. And if Malik Reed at least can't do the basics, then you got to find another body out there. And that's why they were trying to give DeMarvin Leal a chance at that position, rotating him around as much as they did. Now, there were a lot more 2 skull guys in this game, which again, step into you had a bad day and you had a really bad play or a series of bad plays. These guys didn't qualify for 3 skulls, but man, they were pretty close. Dan Moore Jr., Trey Norwood, Devin Bush, Malik Reed, I left on here from last week at the 2 skull position, so he's still there. Montravius Adams and Chris Wormley. Now, if you notice, these are pretty much all defensive guys, right? Except for Dan Moore Jr. Dan Moore Jr. and this could be just that he's next to Kevin Dotson, but man, he was also getting beat too much. And I get it. He's up against Von Miller, excuse me. He's up against Von Miller, and that's no easy task. But even times when he wasn't, he needed to hold up a block in the run game, and he was getting whipped. And I felt like Dan Moore Jr. needed to do more. But these other guys on defense, Trey Norwood, not only did he get beat on the deep ball that was 98-yard touchdown, and he unnecessarily came over and took up space that he didn't need to. He needed to play deep safety. but there were times he was just consistently out of position. The touchdown pass to Stephon Diggs, he came up in the RPO and didn't drop back. He kind of approached the line of scrimmage and he vacated the part of the field that Cam Sutton was kind of leading him into. They were supposed to bracket Stephon Diggs a bit better in that play, and I didn't think that was handled well. Devin Bush, I felt like this was the worst game that he's had so far. In other games, I think he's really stepped up. And I think like, especially early on, the first game against the Bengals, I thought he was good. I actually thought he held his own against the Patriots. Browns, Jets, not as much, but this game was this looked like last year's Devin Bush. Late to the hole, not being in position, not doing enough in coverage. Those are problems. I think that a lot of this is compounding on things. Now, again, Malik Reed, not supposed to be there. That was my fault. I didn't take him off the list from last week because he's definitely a 3-skull guy. But the last 2 guys I put here were Montravius Adams and Chris Wormley. Now, why those guys specifically? Go look at their stat lines. When you look at their stat lines in this game, it's really, really rough because these were guys who played a good amount of snaps. They were both on the field. Neither one of them registered a single tackle. Like they didn't hit the quarterback. They didn't do anything. And that's a problem. They played even more than Tyson Alualu. These guys were being brought up. And this is, I think, Mike Tomlin and this defense's biggest problem right now is that when Larry Ogunjobi, he only played, I think, 7 snaps in this game. When he went out, there was no interior defensive presence next to Cam Hayward. And the Bills were able to just double team him all day and say, you know what, this other guy's not going to beat us. And they were right. They didn't. And they needed those guys to step up, especially against the run, because then, they weren't helping against the run. I think the Steelers gave up, 120 yards on the ground in this game? Approximately that. But you got to find ways to do that. And you also got to win your one-on-ones in the passing game. Because against Josh Allen, the only thing that saved them last year a lot of times was the ability to get after him. And yes, a lot of times it was TJ Watt, but Cam Hayward can get loose if you're doing that, but they didn't have that. And that was a big problem, I think, in this defense when you looked at it. I gave Myles Jack a pass because I thought he was actually in position a lot. He was fighting. He was giving. I thought there was a penalty he shouldn't have taken. But, but when you looked at the rest of the game, I actually thought he held his own there. But there's other guys who need to step up as well. The 1-skulls, there's a lot of those guys as well. But there are some guys who I gave a single star to. I'll give you a heads up. There's no 2-star grades and no 3-star grades this week. Not when you get beat that bad. But there were some guys who I thought did what they could in the midst of an utter beatdown. We'll get to see who those guys were and who the 1-skull guys were in the third segment here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, we got to talk to you guys about our friends at BetOnline. Now, BetOnline is your number one place to go put money down on all things sports. It's the best time of the year to do that, too, because Major League Baseball's playoffs are here now. Playoff baseball is fun. It's exciting. I'm not a huge baseball guy, but I love playoff baseball. It's fun. But you also got the week 6 of the NFL is here. So you got that, NBA and NHL right around the corner. All that can be bet on BetOnline, where you can see the odds, the lines, the prop bets, everything that you want to bet on is on BetOnline, your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action when you visit BetOnline, where the game starts. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter here, just breaking things down. We're finishing up our grades here, going over things. Who got 3-star? Who got our stars? Who got our skulls? We did our 3-skull grades and our 2-skull grades, but we still have to go through our 1-skull grades, and we do have some 1-stars. Now, we've had, I think, like 10 different guys go 3 skulls or 2 skulls, but let's go over the 1-skulls, because there are guys here who I was looking back at who I think that they needed to at least just hold down the fort a little bit better than they did. Chase Claypool, I was originally going to give 2 skulls to. But when I looked back, there was one play where I thought he should have caught the ball on an out pattern where Kenny Pickett did throw it on time. But Kenny Pickett, when I looked at that, did throw it behind him. It allowed the defender to get to the ball, and Claypool wasn't able to bring it down. But still, like I was saying earlier, I think Chase Claypool last year when they played not last year, excuse me, his rookie season when he was actually coming out strong and everyone was calling Mapletron and everything was looking good. The first team that I put him in check was the Buffalo Bills. Why? Because they pressed him. And I think that showed the entire NFL, oh man, you get in that guy's face, he's not as productive anymore. He's not just because he has size doesn't mean you can't check him. And I think that's a problem that he ran into with this game. But there were also times, the reason why I gave him one skull, there were plenty of times he was getting open and he did look like he was that guy. But there was also times where I thought he needed to show a bit more effort in run blocking or pass or, blocking for his teammates, where we've seen at times when he's willing, he can blow somebody up. But I think there's plenty of times when when his head's not in the game or if the ball didn't come his way, he loses focus. And I will say that that's breaking away from what I thought he had a strong start to the year with, doing all the little things. But again, when you're losing, that happens. But again, one skull for him. I give one skull to James Daniels for this game. There were times I felt like he didn't combinate well, and there were times that he had a chance that if he hits this one little block here, it springs Najee Harris for a big play. It springs something open. I think that he could have been better. Alex Highsmith. I mean, the reason I put Alex Highsmith here is because I look at his overall production, and man, he came out in this game. He's getting the opportunities to go after it. He had one tackle, and it was a tackle for loss, but never got after Josh Allen. Never was the difference maker there. And I think that that's where, if you're being realistic, that's what he has to be the person that steps up when T.J. Watt's out. I also gave Tyson Alualu one skull. He was getting blown up, but he's also playing a lot less snaps now. I think that Tyson Alualu's days are behind him. That the Steelers brought him back because he was a veteran and they wanted to see how he would do. He's not the guy he was 2 years ago before the injury that sidelined him last season. I'd also say Mason Cole. Granted, Mason Cole did appear to be injured. He wasn't a walking boot on Monday in the Steelers locker room, but apparently he says like he's going to be able to play Sunday. It's just fine. This is precautionary, but man, he was getting blown up a lot. Again, one skull though. Injury, I won't take that too far. Minkah Fitzpatrick. Now you're probably saying, "Whoa, Chris, was Minkah Fitzpatrick getting a skull?" Well, yes, because he gave up that deep ball on the second Gabe Davis touchdown, and there was never that redeeming moment. It would be different if Minkah Fitzpatrick came out in this game and he had another interception or a couple really big breakups like he's had in pretty much all of the Steelers games, but he didn't, so therefore he gets a skull. Last guy here, Arthur Maulet. I thought he got picked out a bunch in this game. But I like Arthur Maulet's fight. This is not that I don't indict him for too much in this game because that guy I do think has the passion that you want as the kind of slot guy, the energy guy who's gonna fight and be the guy like, hey, I don't get paid a lot of money, but I am here to work. So those are my one skull guys. We've now gone through all our skulls. Let's go through our star guys here, and there's a few guys here that I wanted to give some props to because I thought that there were guys that fought in the midst of the mayhem. Kenny Pickett gets 1 star, but I will tell you this. I almost didn't give him this 1 star because when I looked at the all-22, there were plays that he didn't take advantage of that I thought that he needed to. In fact, like there was a 10-yard play that he went to Zach Gentry on that worked out for the play. But man, Chase Claypool was wide open down the field. There were times that I think that he didn't see something. His interception to Diontae Johnson. Initially, when I watched that live, I just thought he made a terrible read, but he actually made the right read. It was cover 2. He just needed to put the ball up a little bit higher, let Diontae Johnson get to it. But again, rookie first game against one of the best defenses in the NFL. I give him that. For a guy to be this composed in the middle of mayhem of just a complete butt whooping, I give him at least that 1 star. George Pickens also 1 star. When he was thrown to, he made it happen, made some really good plays, but not as much production as the last game when he had over 100 yards, but he had 83. I give him a star for that. Cam Hayward, man, was fighting tooth and nail with everything he had, taking on double teams almost every play, eating things up and not complaining, trying to make plays, stuffed Josh Allen a hole one time, forced a fumble at the goal line, even when the game was really over. He didn't need to keep fighting at that point, but that's who Cam Hayward is. He gets a star. Chukwuma Okorafor, the one guy on the offensive line I thought actually held up in this game from more than anyone else, and that's why I give him a star. I do think that they have found at least a piece in Chukwuma Okorafor. He is not a dominant offensive lineman, but he is a good one. And I think he's a guy, if they can invest and get some first and second round guys on this unit and he sticks around, he can be a reliable veteran that stays for the long term and can kind of be like, a stabilizing piece while the other guys are the stars of the offensive line. Levi Wallace, yes, he got beat on the first throw, but I put that the first touchdown, I put more on Trey Norwood, kind of, giving up the inside leverage when he's the cover 1 safety, and that's what Levi Wallace was kind of playing him into. But this guy had a deep breakup while covering Stephon Diggs one-on-one. He also had that interception that I thought was really impressive on Gabe Davis. So I give him that because Levi Wallace was filled in, and especially when Cam Sutton went down, he was the Steelers' top cornerback. And in that situation, I thought he at least rose to the occasion. But then, of course, he got hurt too. So there's that. Zach Gentry, I remember during the game that he made some plays, but I didn't realize he got 5 of 6 targets for 43 yards, and he was making it work. I give him credit for the fight that he showed. I mean, that guy, he's ridiculously huge. When Pat Freiermuth went down, he was a reliable option for Kenny Pickett to check down to. So I give him a star. I also give Jaylen Warren. I thought that one thing that I've noticed with Jaylen Warren, he's really aggressive in pass protection. I like that about him a lot. He led the Steelers in rushing on 5 carries for 24 yards. But I want to say this for all of the people that continue to say that, oh, he's better than Najee Harris. You ain't watching what's really out there. When Najee Harris gets the ball, or they think that he might get the ball, there are times that the safeties are creeping up, the linebackers, everyone's creeping up, and it's not necessarily 8 in the box all the time, but guys are flying to the line of scrimmage. And when Jaylen Warren is back there, nobody is doing that. Everyone's staying back. In fact, on his biggest run of the game, he went 12 yards. Well, he picked up half his yards on one play in this game. It was simply because the linebackers are flat-footed. They were waiting for the play action. They were waiting to see, okay, here comes the RPO. He's going to try to hit us over the middle. And that gave Jaylen Warren all the time to kind of hit the second level and pick up momentum. Najee Harris is not getting that because everyone knows if you let that guy get going, he will kill you. So, again, that's not to slight Jaylen Warren, but that's why he gets 1 star and not more. And that's also why I don't have Najee Harris listed here. He doesn't get a skull because, frankly, he wasn't given much opportunities to make plays. I feel like there were the few runs that he had, he was fighting. He was making guys miss just to get the little inches that he did get. Last guy that gets a star on this list, DeMarvin Leal, had a breakup or two in this game. Didn't have a tackle for loss, but he set up a tackle for loss early on. I like what he's putting together. I think that he's figuring things out. I also think that it's going to be tough for him because he's rotating a lot around. But if he finds his place in this defense, man, the Steelers may have one of their key defenders of this defensive line for the foreseeable future. But again, there's a lot of guys that need a lot of work in this game. I think that there's things that we need to find. And I said this before on Monday after the episode. In these parts of the season, when you're struggling, when everyone's kind of trying to figure out how to best move forward and who you're going to take with you into the future when the Steelers do finish their rebuild and they're back to being regular contenders and maybe even Super Bowl contenders someday, you're looking for the guys in this group that step up and find ways to be a contributor, to overcome those tough moments and find ways to say, hey, you know what? I'm taking that guy with me at any foxhole. Cam Hayward's that, but he's been that for the longest time. And in fact, I think Cam Hayward's proving grounds were when the Steelers were going through their last bound of rebounds, which is the early 2010s in 2012 and 2013 when they went back-to-back 8-8 back-to-back seasons. But then you saw in 2014, 2015, 2016, he came around those years. He figured things out. I think that, right now, if you were to look at anybody like that, George Pickens falls into that category. I think Kenny Pickett, at least for the last 6 quarters, has fallen into that category of the guys that you want to take with you like that. I think there's times that Alex Highsmith does. I think Cam Sutton does at times too, but you need more guys. You need guys like Devin Bush to do that. I think Miles Jack gives you something at times, but you need more. And the Steelers aren't going to see any improvement if more guys don't step up in these ways. So that's why we gave out so many skull grades this time, because I think that those guys that aren't stepping up, they're leading to be bigger problems than they need to be. So we'll be going into more and more of this as the week goes on. We got a Wednesday show, we got a Thursday crossover, and of course Friday, getting you ready for the weekend, Buccaneers week. I do think the Steelers stand a much better chance in this game than people give them credit for, because whenever the Steelers get blown out, people think, oh, well, they're done. And this has happened several times throughout the years. If they lose a big game, everyone thinks, well, they're not going to bounce back, but they seem to find a way to bounce back. The Buccaneers might be a team that could do that in, because they're not playing very good football themselves. I still wouldn't favor the Steelers in this game, but I do think there's an opportunity there if the Steelers can get it together in certain parts. What parts will those be? We'll talk more about that. We'll also talk about a little bit the defense as we go throughout the week. Thanks again for checking out the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Check me out at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette where I cover Pitt athletics. You can find my work there. I just did a film study on their offensive line and Izzy Abanikanda big day. He just broke Tony Dorsett's single game rushing record with 320 rushing yards. That was ridiculous. I'm also here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, also on Channel 11 a lot. If you're enjoying this show, like the video, subscribe to our channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes. If you want to help us out even further, go on Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review with a positive comment. Do both at the same time. You get a shout out at the end of the show. Thanks again, everybody. We're back on your screens and in your ears Wednesday talking about your Pittsburgh Steelers.